Hello everyone. Welcome to Magical Stocks channel, where we make trading stress-free. PSE index went up from 7,251.97 last January 28, 2022, to 7,456.35 this February 4, 2022. This performance is equivalent to a 2.82% increase in the index for the week. Our magical stocks also went up from 844.97K pesos to 871.17K pesos, or a 3.1% increase in our investment. Overall, our magical stocks profit went up from 144.16K pesos to 170.35K pesos. We set a new record for our investment. The previous record held was 157.05K pesos last November 24, 2021. For this week, our investment is earning 170.35K pesos or 24.31% profit. We will update the 2 batches of magical stocks together with the 6 experimental magical stocks for this week's video. Before we proceed with our update, and if you are interested in investing using our magical stocks or monitoring our system's effectiveness, please like this channel, subscribe and hit the notification button to keep you updated weekly. We concluded the November 2020 experimental magical stocks with a 3.34% gain and a slight gap advantage with the market of 0.11%. We concluded the December 2020 experimental magical stocks with a 7.78% gain and a gap advantage with the market of 7.44%. Let's now discuss the February experimental magical stocks performance from January 28, 2022, to February 4, 2022. Here is our worksheet for our February experimental stocks. Our top performer is SCC gaining 95.58%, while the least performer is VLL losing -18.2%. We have one sell signal in our 5 experimental stocks. Let's look at the experiments trend, which we compare against the PSE index starting February 19, 2021. The PSE index went up from 4.7% to 7.65%, gaining 2.95%. The experimental magical stocks also went up from 8.58% to 8.86%, gaining 0.28%. The experiment is above the benchmark line, while the index is also above the benchmark line. Our experiment is above the index with a gap of 1.21% this February 4, 2022, coming from 3.88% last January 28, 2022. Let's now discuss the March experimental magical stocks performance from January 28, 2022, to February 4, 2022. Here is our worksheet for our March experimental stocks. Our top performer is DMC gaining 66%, while the least performer is FGen losing -5.25%. We have 2 sell signal in our 5 experimental stocks. Let's look at the experiments trend, which we compare against the PSE index starting March 19, 2021. The PSE index went up from 12.68% to 15.85%, gaining 3.18%. The experimental magical stocks also went up from 24.01% to 26.13%, gaining 2.12%. The experiment is above the benchmark line, while the index is also above the benchmark line. Our experiment is above the index with a gap of 10.28% this February 4, 2022, coming from 11.34% last January 28, 2022. Let's now discuss the May experimental magical stocks performance from January 28, 2022, to February 4, 2022. Here is our worksheet for our May experimental stocks. Our top performer is AEV gaining 78.42%, while the least performer is MPI but gaining 1.87%. We have 2 sell signal in our 5 experimental stocks. Let's look at the experiments trend, which we compare against the PSE index starting May 21, 2021. The PSE index went up from 16.98% to 20.28%, gaining 3.3%. The experimental magical stocks also went up from 29.9% to 32.81%, gaining 2.9%. The experiment is above the benchmark line, while the index is also above the benchmark line. Our experiment is above the index with a gap of 12.53% this February 4, 2022, coming from 12.92% last January 28, 2022. Let's now discuss the June experimental magical stocks performance from January 28, 2022, to February 4, 2022. Here is our worksheet for our June experimental stocks. Our top performer is AP gaining 50.31%, while the least performer is MPI losing -4.99%. We have 3 sell signal in our 5 experimental stocks. Let's look at the experiments trend, which we compare against the PSE index starting June 18, 2021. The PSE index went up from 5.85% to 8.83%, gaining 2.98%. The experimental magical stocks also went up from 26.06% to 29.42%, gaining 3.36%. The experiment is above the benchmark line, while the index is also above the benchmark line. Our experiment is above the index with a gap of 20.59% this February 4, 2022, coming from 20.21% last January 28, 2022. Let's now discuss the August experimental magical stocks performance from January 28, 2022, to February 4, 2022. Here is our worksheet for our August experimental stocks. Our top performer is MWC gaining 36.39%, while the least performer is LTG but gaining 5.83%. We have 1 sell signal in our 5 experimental stocks. Let's look at the experiments trend, which we compare against the PSE index starting August 20, 2021. The PSE index went up from 9.33% to 12.41%, gaining 3.08%. The experimental magical stocks also went up from 14.05% to 17.69%, gaining 3.63%. The experiment is above the benchmark line, while the index is also above the benchmark line. Our experiment is above the index with a gap of 5.28% this February 4, 2022, coming from 4.73% last January 28, 2022. Let's now discuss the September experimental magical stocks performance from January 28, 2022, to February 4, 2022. Here is our worksheet for our September experimental stocks. Our top performer is MEG gaining 10.62%, while the least performer is FGen losing -11.83%. We still don't have any sell signal for each of the 5 experimental stocks. Let's look at the experiments trend, which we compare against the PSE index starting September 17, 2021. The PSE index went up from 4.91% to 7.86%, gaining 2.96%. The experimental magical stocks also went up from 1.23% to 3.36%, gaining 2.13%. The experiment is above the benchmark line, while the index is also above the benchmark line. Our experiment is below the index with a gap of -4.5% this February 4, 2022, coming from -3.68% last January 28, 2022. Here is the worksheet for our 2 batches of magical stocks. Our top performer is SECB gaining 8.93%, while the least performer is GLOW losing -1.85%. We still don't have any sell signal for our magical stocks. We already sold our first batch and we were successful by earning 32.78%, which is above our target of 30%. We also already sold our second batch and we were successful by earning 33.46%, which is above our target of 30%. Our third batch is below the market with a gap of -3.73% this February 4, 2022, coming from -1.15% last January 28, 2022. Our fourth batch is above the market with a gap of 11.42% this February 4, 2022, coming from 13.57% last January 28, 2022. To summarize our investment, the first batch was sold and earned 49,630.94 pesos. The second batch was sold and earned 63,435.65 pesos. The third batch is gaining by 12.5%, coming from 11.88%. The fourth batch is gaining by 19.26%, coming from 18.46%. Overall, with an investment of 700.82K pesos, our investment's current value is 871.17K pesos, equivalent to 24.31% coming from 20.57%. We have profited in our first batch, also profited in our second batch, a gaining third batch and a gaining fourth batch. That will be all for the Magical Stocks update this week. Thank you for watching. Next week, we will continue updating the other 2 batches of Magical Stocks and the other 6 experimental stocks. Quote, "The trend is your friend until the end when it bends." Unquote. Ed Seikota. See you in the following video, have a great day ahead.